This week, donor retention. Jay Love is CEO of Bloomerang. We'll talk about holding on to donors you've got because it's much cheaper and easier to keep a donor than to replace one. Jay has strategies for you. Also, more Maria sites. Maria Semple, our prospect research contributor and the prospect finder, keeps up her reputation as doyenne of dirt cheap and free. This month, she'll review Donor Search and List Select. Between the guests on Tony's Take Two, the IRS publishes a list of charities that have lost tax-exempt status each month, and in March, that list will be longer than it has been other months, and I'll explain. Now I'm very pleased to welcome Jay Love. He's the CEO and co-founder of Bloomerang and Senior Vice President of Avectra. Both companies serve the nonprofit sector only, with tools for fundraising and communications. He was Senior Vice President of the Arts and Culture Division at Blackbaud. Before that, he was CEO and co-founder of eTapestry. Jay is a member of the National Board of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and I'm very glad that his work brings him to the show. Jay Love, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, Tony. It's good to be here this morning.
It's a pleasure to have you. Donor retention, Jay, why is this important?
Well, because it's continued to fall. The main source of the data that I've been referring to so often in the last year has been from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, otherwise known as FEP, that was a combined effort of the Urban Institute and the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And they've been doing this for the last 5 or 6 years, and it's the first time that data of this nature has come directly from the donor databases. So the charities that have the software that's in use by the various vendors, they're now sharing the summary data and being able to tell from that summary data exactly what's happening in retention of donors from one year to the next. And it's quite scary in that retention rate has dropped from the low 50s now to 41% in the most recent survey.
Has it been dropping consistently through the 5 or 6 years that you've had this survey?
There was a year or two that it held pretty steady, but overall it's dropped about 10 or 11% since the time that the study has been enacted.
Let's just reassure any charities that might be using software. You would certainly know if your data was going to be included, right? And it would have been anonymized and aggregated?
Absolutely. All it is summary data, and it's part of the licensing with the vendors. The very nice part about that is not only does it provide information that people can use, but many of the software vendors are allowing you to compare your results to the aggregate results, so you have a very good idea of how you're comparing against the national average. And like I said, let's hope that your individual charity is doing better than losing 6 out of every 10 donors from one year to the next, because losing nearly 60% is a pretty scary proposition. It means that you have to be on a constant treadmill of bringing in brand new first-year donors, and the retention rate for those first-year donors is even worse. In most cases, that's down in the 20s or 30s as far as the retention for those individuals.
And the next thing I was going to ask, you just answered it. So the retention rates are falling, which means attrition rates are rising, and we're now at 59%?
We're now at 59% in the most recent study there, and like I said, it's a trend we've got to turn around because, as we all know, just like the commercial world, existing customers or existing donors in this case are much easier to keep than bringing in brand new ones, because the retention rate is at least a little bit higher for those folks that have already been with you.
Do we know about how much this costs, how much it costs to acquire a new donor?
Well, most organizations do know that. Most people know that the cost to acquire a new donor is usually more than the monies received from that donor in the first year. You don't get to a break-even status until the second year in most cases.
And, of course, there's considerable time involved acquiring new donors versus thanking and retaining existing donors.
Yeah, and there's some basic things, Tony, that people can do. One of the things that we tried to allow software packages to help people to realize is if a brand new donor comes in and it happens to be above the average donor level that you have, that might be a situation, instead of sending out that tired old thank you letter, that you might want to pick up the phone and call that person and thank them directly and get to know them a little bit, or try to set up that face-to-face meeting or get them to come take a tour of your facility or something, because if there's a telephone contact, the retention rate doubles or triples in most cases.
And we're going to get to a bunch of those factors that we know influence retention. But Jay, your background is technology, eTapestry, Blackbaud, now Bloomerang, and Avectra. Is this strictly a technology problem, or there's a big there's a big personal factor to these relationships as well?
Very much so. A donor relationship is no different than any sort of a personal relationship, a friendship. Now, I know in some larger organizations, those donors are people that you only meet via electronic communications or written communications in some way, shape, or form. But even that, as we all know, if you had a pen pal back when you were in high school, there were ways of building that relationship and taking it to the next level, even if it was only through written communications, so that you can, have that person on the other end of the receiving end feel like they're more than just a statistic. They're actually a person that's connected to your organization and to your mission, and their monies are going to achieve something different than what they could at someplace else with those dollars.
But as well, technology has a role too.
Oh, very much so. As like so many things in life, just being able to know what your retention rate is tends to improve it. I think of the old Andrew Carnegie story of going into one of his steel mill plants and asking the worker on the line how many of that particular widget or whatever that they made for the day, and he took a piece of chalk and wrote it down on the floor and said, 21. And that was how many this guy did as a shift. Well, then the afternoon shift came in and said, well, what's that number on the floor? And they said, well, the big guy was here, and they wrote down what they did. Well, that shift, they crossed it off, and instead of 21, there was 25. And then this went on for weeks until it was up over 50 to do that. And it was all because someone was noticing and actually saying, this is the number that we're shooting for or that we're trying to surpass.
And then not long after that, Carnegie locked down the steel mill and kept all the workers out. But that's a different story. See,
isn't it, though?
I went to Carnegie Mellon.
He at least started a foundation, right?
Yes, he did. He gave libraries and pools and lots of public spaces in the Pittsburgh area, but it was a bit of a barren.
I would not want that to be any sort of a witness or praise for his business practices. I've heard quite cruel things came out of that.
I went to Carnegie Mellon University, so I've heard those stories.
Oh, very much so, then, haven't you?
Yes. All right. So this is quite startling. I mean, we're only retaining. Let's use round numbers, 60 and 40. We're only retaining 40% of our donors. I'm sure you're comfortable with the representativeness of the sample that this data is from?
Yeah, just to give you a little bit of an idea, that this is based upon data coming from about 3,200 charities that in the most recent time period raised just over $2 billion in fundraising dollars. So it's a small percentage of the total fundraising world, but it is a very statistically relevant sample that's being taken from that group. Now, this is primarily focused, I think what gives us so many legs too, it's primarily focused on the small and medium-sized nonprofit. There's a few larger ones in there, but the vast majority of the nonprofits that are in this representative sample are raising less than $10 million per year, and most of them are below $5 million.
Okay, well, and that's the audience for this show, small and mid-sized charities. Jay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, you and I will talk a lot about some of these factors that we know influence retention and what charities can do to increase their retention rate. I know you'll stay with us, Jay, and I hope everybody else does too.
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
Are you confused about which diet is right for you? Are you tired of being tired? How about improving your energy, strength, and appearance? Hi, I'm Rika Keck, a holistic nutrition and wellness consultant. If you have answered yes to any of my questions, contact me now at nyintegratedhealth.com or at 646-285-8588. Initiate change and transform your life.
Are you concerned about the future of your business or career? Would you like it all to just be better? Well, the way to do that is through better communication. And the best way to do that is training from the team at Improving Communications. This is Larry Sharp, host of the Ivory Tower Radio program and director at Improving Communications. Does your office need better leadership, customer service, sales, or maybe better writing or speaking skills? Could they be better at dealing with confrontation, conflicts, and touchy subjects? All are covered here at Improving Communications. If you're in the New York City area, stop by one of our public classes or get your human resources in touch with us. The website is improvingcommunications.com. That's improvingcommunications.com. Improve your professional environment. Be more effective. Be happier and make more money. Improving Communications. That's the answer.
Hey, all you crazy listeners. Looking to boost your business? Why not advertise on Talking Alternative with very reasonable rates? Interested? Simply email at info@talkingalternative.com. Talking Alternative.
Welcome back to Big Nonprofit Ideas for the Other 95%. Jay Love is CEO and co-founder of Bloomerang, and we're talking about donor retention this segment. Jay, we know that there are a bunch of factors that either positively or negatively impact retention, and there's a lot of lessons that I think donors can take away. Charities can take away from these factors. Why don't we get started with actually some of them, though, that charities don't have a direct influence over, like the person's giving,
right,
and recency.
I tend to break these factors into three categories, Tony. One based upon financial, one based upon activities, and then a third one based upon communications.
Okay.
And if we take a look at the first one there, as you were alluding to, is the financial aspect of it. There are certain things that you can tell that are moving that engagement level or that engagement needle up or down. Such things as, have they made a donation in the last 12 months? Was that donation higher or lower than their previous one? Did they upgrade or did they downgrade? Did they make multiple donations? Did they support multiple causes or multiple funds within your organization so that they're involved in different ways? Are they doing something in the way of pledging or in a recurring gift mode? We know that someone that has signed a pledge card or that's giving in a pledging or recurring basis is much more likely to be retained from year to year to year than someone that is not. Did they come in knowing that they were giving to your organization rather than supporting a runner in a race or something of that nature? So those are all factors that I think from the financial standpoint can move that needle up or down accordingly. Okay.
Now charities can have an influence on some of these. For instance, you mentioned earlier, if an office sees that a new donor's gift is above the average, they should, you're suggesting, reply with an above-average acknowledgement and thank you.
Exactly. Do something outside of the ordinary, whether it's pick up the phone calling them, trying to get a meeting, or maybe a handwritten note or a handwritten PS. Several of the boards that I serve on, the first part of the board meeting that we do, each one of us writes out 10 handwritten notes during the course of the board meeting to a donor that's an above-average first-time donor.
Oh, excellent.
To let them know how much we appreciate that and inviting them in to come in and take a tour of the facility.
You're doing that in every board meeting? You take time before every board meeting?
Every single board meeting. I'm on the board of the local food bank here in Indiana, one of the larger food banks, and we have 6 to 8 board meetings a year, and that is part of every board meeting.
I don't suppose you're in Bloomington, Indiana, with the company named Bloomerang, are you?
Well, we're actually in Indianapolis, Indiana, with a company called Bloomerang.
Okay.
So yeah, to do that.
We should meet sometime because I'm in Indiana very often.
Wow! I didn't realize
north
that.
North of Indianapolis, in Carmel. I'm there quite often.
Okay, good.
So there are other things. Now you mentioned recurring donations. That's a very positive factor, and you're more likely to retain that donor than someone who doesn't do a recurring donation. So how can a charity go out of its way then to thank that recurring versus non-recurring donor?
Well, I don't think it's as much thanking them in that situation, Tony, as it is trying to see if you can talk somebody or have them be interested in doing a recurring gift or a pledge, letting them know that at the time of making their transaction, would it be nice to be able to support that particular part of our mission in ongoing time periods, so that if you set that up to do that, it's much more widely used around the rest of the world in the United States of being able to automatically deduct from a checking account or from a savings account or even a credit card on a recurring basis. So instead of making, let's say, a one-time gift of $240, maybe having $20 per month taken out with no stop date there. That becomes a way of really having long-term retention for that individual.
So that may be worth looking into for charities that are not offering that. And
Right.
if you want a little more information on that, my other podcast, which is for the Chronicle of Philanthropy, Fundraising Fundamentals, look back in the archive of that. You'll find it on iTunes. You'll also find it on the Chronicle of Philanthropy website. And I had a guest there named Mark, M-A-R-C, Halpert, H-A-L-P-E-R-T, and he was an expert in e-commerce and talked about online giving and recurring giving and how to set that up. So you might look back at that Fundraising Fundamentals podcast if you want more detail on how to inaugurate a recurring giving program the way Jay Love is explaining.
Would you like to look at a couple of the other factors here, the activities and the communication ones, Tony?
Well, give me a chance now, Jay. Don't take over the show. We're going to get there. No, the answer. It's just for that. No, the answer is a quick no. You're off. I'm going to have 11 minutes of dead air time now. I had planned to be with you, but I'm booting you off. No, of course, yes. Of course, we're going to talk about activities and communications.
Okay, great.
What do you have under activities?
Well, let's think about all the different activities that you can track that would be involved with it, especially, and you mentioned with some of your previous broadcasts, some of the social media, but whether or not someone attends an event or whether they attend multiple events, have they taken a tour of the facility? Those are types of things that happen. But the one that I think is really growing in popularity is all the activities that surround the social media. Have they posted on your Facebook wall? Have they become a friend? Do they say something about your nonprofit with a particular hashtag in a tweet or on a Facebook or in a LinkedIn profile for that? Are they active in some way of promoting your nonprofit to do that? And I often think about in the days before the nonprofits knew to have like Facebook pages and stuff like that, where a very active volunteer, I think it was the American Cancer Society or somebody like that, turned around and found out that there was somebody that already had 20,000 people following them or liking them in Facebook, and they were able to help them bring that Facebook page over to their usage. But all those factors, if you can follow those, and there's ways of very easily electronically doing that. Technology has taken us to whole new levels where you can be aware of those factors, and it can actually become part of your CRM or your database, knowing that someone has said something about you and giving that a particular value in their engagement level.
Now, CRM, of course, we have talked about this on the show, but I want to caution you about jargon jail, which I have on the show. CRM, just explain CRM in case listeners may not know.
Okay, that's Constituent Relationship Management. CRM, it's a fancy name for a donor database.
Okay, and we have had guests on talking about CRM, but I like to keep listeners on, keep everybody on the same foundation.
No problem at all. The key difference being, instead of just being a database of pure donors and maybe prospective donors, it's everybody that the nonprofit touches in some way, shape, or form. So it may be people that are affected by its mission. It may be vendors. It may be suppliers. So it's every single communication interaction that's taking place.
Indeed, and we have talked about that and some of the platforms that support it on the show. Now let's focus on some of the things that charities can have the most direct impact on. You mentioned earlier tour of the facility and encouraging donors to do that, especially if they happen to be an above-average donor first time. But that's something that, and it's also a positive when you get that person to do the tour, then that's a positive retention factor. That's something that a charity can directly have impact on by extending invitations.
Exactly, extending an invitation, but just thinking about what their communications are. Some donors have never heard from their charity except in the form of another request for a donation. It's always someone reaching out with a hand versus sharing information. So think about it. Perhaps you could set up a communication schedule and actually go back to the person and say, this is how we're doing. We're tracking ourselves, and this is how well we're achieving our mission. And one that's absolutely magical that I just wish everybody would do is just telling every donor what their monies are doing. What if you can specifically say that those dollars went to this particular activity or this particular fund, and this is what it's doing, and even if it goes into a general fund, you can just say these are what your monies are achieving for us, and just share that information without asking for another donation. People tend to feel very appreciated for that being the case, and I guess a lot of my experience has come over the years, Tony, of becoming much more of a donor myself. And then I used to run an interesting experiment at eTapestry and a Bloomerang where I would ask the new employees to take $50. We would provide them $50 and say, go out and make 5 or 10 donations to 5 or 10 different charities and come back to me in 3 months and let me know who built a relationship with you and who did not.
Excellent. At those low levels. And what did you find?
There were some absolutely marquee organizations that my employees would stumble upon that even for a $5 gift,
right,
they would build a relationship. And what was ironic, some of my employees are still lifelong donors to those organizations after making that small gift that was given to them to make on behalf of the company.
That's terrific. That's a great lesson. Yeah. And
it was remarkable on how to do it. And I told them to try to mix. I said pick between a few national organizations and a few local organizations just to see what's going on there, because I honestly believe any small nonprofit, and I know a lot of your listeners are in that category, Tony, all they have to do is try that experiment themselves. Take $100 and go make $10 gifts or $25 gifts to some national organizations, and then just copy what those groups are doing. Find out which ones make them feel the best, and start building that into their own processes that they're doing at the local charity.
Excellent. That's a terrific suggestion and a great use, I think, of $100. You can survey you can survey 20 charities for $100.
Right. I mean, you get to do your own little mini MBA or research project for $100 or $200, and because you get to see every type of communication. And I would mail some in, and I would do some electronically, and see what the difference is.
Listeners may want to listen back to some of the 4-month series that I had with Amy Sample Ward, our regular social media contributor, about real engagement using the online networks, because a lot of what Jay talked about, posting on the Facebook wall, replying to a tweet, etc., there are real engagement strategies, and Amy and I talked about that over 4 months of her being on once a month, how to really engage through the social media sites. Jay, there's also things just that people can report to the charity, like if they keep their communication preferences current.
Exactly, things like that in the communication area. If you are able to, if your email system and your communication system is tied into your database, you can check real quickly, does someone open my emails I send to them? Are they clicking through to links in it to read further on the stories? A very important one, are they forwarding it on to other people? Are they allowing that? You can get all that reported back to you, and it can be part of the database that you can see. And then you hit upon a real important one there. If someone has taken the time to let you know that their address has changed, either their electronic email address or their mailing address has changed, boy, that's a very special person. You want to put a big red gold star or something on that, because that person, if they've taken the time to let you know that their address has changed, is probably 4 to 5 times more likely to become a major donor or a legacy donor to your organization in the long run, because they care.
Now
they've done far out of the ordinary what anybody else would do.
That's so interesting, because it's purely ministerial. They filled out a reply card with an updated phone number or address or email address. What can a charity do? I mean, should there be thanks for keeping current with us? I mean, because typically now I think most charities doing nothing. It goes to the database administrator, the donor services team. The database gets updated, and then that's it. What could we be doing to
I think that record
keep that
needs
person
to
engaged?
Be marked that this is someone who took the time out of the ordinary to do that, and that should be made to the attention of either a gift officer or a fundraising person or a planned giving person, so that they can reach out and just try to get to know that person. Because if you combine the two, if that's someone that's been a multi-year donor, even at a small level, and has let you know that, and many of you out there I know have read the book The Millionaire Next Door, that may be a good chance that that person falls into that category and could be a very, very substantial legacy donor sometime down the road for your organization.
Jay, we have just a few minutes left. Let's talk about your the communications factors that we're aware of that we haven't talked about yet. What are some of those that positively influence retention?
We talked about a little bit of them. People that have that have opened up their emails and done different things of that nature. Another big communication factor is if you can find out who has visited your website and who has downloaded information. I think every nonprofit website should give people reasons to come back. That means that there's got to be new content on there, and that could be something as simple as blog posts from the executive director or from other people within the organization, or case studies or case histories. But I always love if you make available documents to download. This is a document that tells you about our mission. This tells you about our performance metrics, what we've been able to do to achieve our mission. If there are PDFs and different types of documents and background information, annual reports, quarterly reports, things of that nature, people love to download them and look at them, particularly folks that are in the higher level of donor categories to do that. So being able to track those communication activities, and then being wired into your front desk or your receptionist. Anybody that calls your organization, that should always be marked in the database to know that this person has reached out and actually dialed our organization, whether it was asking for information or giving us information or something of that nature. Those are people that are communicating with you, and that's half the battle.
Yes, these are excellent and very simple strategies, really, Jay. We have just about a minute left. I have to ask you, what is it you love about the work that you're doing?
Being able to help all size nonprofits do their job better, because if you can, I have hanging on my wall something that my daughter created for me when she was in elementary school, saying that my dad works helping further missions of nonprofits, and I still have that hanging in my wall today, and it will always be part of my life, I think.
Jay, thank you very much for being a guest.
You're welcome. Thank you, Tony.